3 weeks into the season, what have we learned about the 2024 Jets? Well, for starters, if Aaron Rodgers keeps playing like that, the Jets are a legitimate contender. We'll talk about that today on Locked On Jets.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Monday, September 23rd, 2024, and I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen or first watch every day. Subscribe to the show for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, so you'll get new episodes as soon as they're posted. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, please give it a 5-star review. If you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. It helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Well, it's a rare Monday show where we don't have a game to talk about. We don't have a game to recap that was played on Sunday. We don't have a Monday Night Football game to get ready for. So the Jets were in the clubhouse early this weekend. They got the first win of Week 3. Always an enjoyable thing when your team plays Thursday Night Football and wins, because it makes the rest of the weekend so pleasurable to watch. There's no stress. You've already got a good result. You can just watch the rest of the NFL. Wasn't that a great weekend that we had as Jets fans? And part of the reason it was such a great weekend was the play of Aaron Rodgers. And on today's show, I wanted to talk about what we've learned from the New York Jets the first 3 weeks of the season. And it's amazing like how fast the season goes by. And I know I sound like Mike Francesa saying that because that's a classic Francesa line, but in some ways it's true. I mean, 2 weeks ago, the Jets were opening the season. Now they're through 3 of their 17 games. The biggest reason that it feels like the season flies by is that you only have 17 games. So now you're 3 games into the season. I mean, we're really into the 2024 season, and it's given us a chance to learn some things about the New York Jets. And I think the first is that, and it's probably something we already knew going in, but I think Thursday night's game amplified this. The Jets can go very, very far if Aaron Rodgers plays at an elite level. And I think heading into this season, it was fair to question, how good is he going to be? And look, we still don't know how good he's going to be, because I think it's fair to say that he's played at an elite level 1 of the 3 games. I don't think he's played terribly in any of the 3 games. In fact, I think his worst game was still probably better than most Jets quarterbacks' performances of the last 5 years, which, it is a very positive thing. But that Thursday night game, in many ways, shows you the potential of this team. Of course, you don't always make good on potential. You have to go out and deliver each and every week. But the plays Rodgers was making in that game were the types of plays only a handful of quarterbacks in this league can make. When you talk about the way he was getting guys open, it was really subtle. And Kirk Herbstreit did a good job on the Amazon call pointing this out. But sometimes it's just little things a quarterback does. You don't really notice it unless the announcer does point it out. But for example, him freezing a defender, him manipulating a defender, looking right so that the defender will go right, and that opens up some space for a receiver to break into the area the defender vacated. Just these little things, getting the team into the right play at the line of scrimmage. That's something a quarterback will very rarely get credit for because it's not something that's obvious. But Rodgers, when he sees something wrong with the defensive alignment, or if he sees something he can exploit in the defensive alignment, he can make a change. The Allen Lazard touchdown looked like it was a run play. What they called it, he just saw that there was something to exploit. You've seen this at various points through the year. There was a play against Tennessee. It was a 3rd down play where the Titans were playing very soft coverage. They weren't guarding the sticks. So Rodgers just made a quick hand motion to Lazard, and Lazard just ran to the sticks, and Rodgers got it out quick, and the Jets moved the chains. Little things like that. You get the feeling. I've never heard anybody explicitly say it with the Jets, but just from watching it, just from observing, it definitely feels like Rodgers has complete autonomy at the line of scrimmage. And that may sound like an obvious statement. Let me go into it in more detail. It feels like Rodgers has the ability to just adjust one receiver's route. Whereas Zach Wilson, it seemed like Zach Wilson had the ability to change things at the line, but he was never going to understand the game in year 3 in as nuanced a way as Rodgers understands it in year 20. Rodgers, when you've been in the NFL playing the quarterback position for 20 years, and I know Rodgers began his career as the backup in Green Bay, so he didn't really play until his 4th season. But when you've been around as long as Rodgers, there's not really a look a defense can throw at you that's new. He's pretty much seen everything. He knows what the tells are. He knows what the weaknesses in the defensive alignment. He can spot like one little subtle thing. And sometimes it's as simple as just like changing one receiver's route. But beyond that, I mean, some of the throws he made, the touchdown pass to Garrett Wilson, I mean, that ball had to be put in a perfect spot. That ball's not put in the perfect spot. It's going back the other way for a pick six because Garrett Wilson was well covered on that play. And Rodgers just put just the pinpoint accuracy Rodgers showed. But I think one of the biggest things, one of my biggest takeaways from Thursday was how well he moved. And that was different from week 1 and week 2. I mean, you saw that guy week 1 and week 2. That was not a guy who really showed much mobility. Week 3, it looked like he actually was moving a little bit better. So I think the question is, is that a sign of things to come? Is it a sign, now I'm more confident after a couple of games under my belt. Now the Achilles is stronger. Now I can get back to the guy I was. Or was it maybe just like a one-off where, it just felt really good that night? That's something we don't know. But one thing I do know, again, is when you get that type of quarterback play in the NFL, it covers for a lot of other issues. And fortunately for this Jets team, there's a lot of good with the way this roster was built. I mean, there's actually not as much to cover as your typical Jets team has. But I think that the Rodgers we saw on Thursday night is enough to get you excited because it's the type of quarterback play that can make all the difference in the world. The Jets for years have just been begging like a young quarterback to play at a competent level. They've been begging the young quarterback to look average, please be a middle of the pack quarterback. I mean, we went through it with Zach. We went through it with Sam. We went through it with Gino. We went through it with Sanchez. And the Jets could never get their young quarterback to produce even like at a level that was middle of the pack. Well, now what you saw Thursday night was top of the league quarterback play. And if that continues, the Jets can go a long way. Now, again, there's a question. Is that going to be the typical Rodgers performance? I think, a guy like Rodgers is always going to have a couple of games, no matter how old he is, he's going to have a couple of games where he's great. The question is, how frequently will those come? When those games come, the Jets can beat anybody in the league. I know New England wasn't much of a match for the Jets. I know that the Patriots are projected to be a bottom of the league type team, but the Jets blew them out. Yeah, when the Jets play Kansas City, they won't blow Kansas City out. But if Rodgers plays like that, they've got a shot against Kansas City. Against any of the great teams in the AFC. They won't beat them by 21 points the way they beat New England, but they will have a legitimate chance to go toe-to-toe with them. That's the difference a top-tier quarterback can make. And certainly the Jets are hoping that is a sign of things to come. And even if Rodgers, doesn't play at quite that level, again, there are decent pieces around him. But that level of quarterback play, I mean, that's special stuff. That's the type of stuff we haven't seen here since Joe Namath was the quarterback. So very easy to be excited as a Jets fan after a performance like that. Now, here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we're going to turn to a topic that's not Aaron Rodgers. And I know it's tough to believe that there's a Jets topic these days that's not about the future Hall of Fame quarterback. But I think one thing we've learned this year is that there are a couple new faces on this Jets team, a couple of guys who are going to play pretty key roles that maybe we weren't counting on before the season began. And we'll discuss these young players as we continue here on this Monday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by DoorDash. Football is finally back, which means it's time to order your favorite game day food, snack, or drink on DoorDash without missing a play. Once Sunday comes around, you want to watch the Jets play. You probably don't want to have to worry about finding a meal. That's where DoorDash comes in. You just pull out the app, connect you with all the great restaurants in your area. No matter what your go-to is, no matter what you need to eat on game day, DoorDash can connect you with it, and a DoorDasher will bring it to your door. Just use promo code LOCKEDFALL24 for 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order. Limited time offer, terms apply. Promo is not valid for orders containing alcohol. DoorDash, your door to game day greatness, your door to more. Download the DoorDash app now to order your game day favorites. Must be 21 or older to order alcohol. Drink responsibly. Alcohol only available in select markets. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listener, first watch every day. Big shout out to you every day. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. We're talking about things we've learned about the New York Jets through the first 3 weeks of the season on today's episode. And there are a couple new faces, guys who are going to be big contributors this year. I have one on the offense and one on the defense. And I don't think either of these is a huge shock, but neither of these guys was a proven player entering the season. And I think through the first 3 weeks, now you can be pretty confident these guys are going to be players who will matter for the Jets as we move through the season and in a positive way. On offense, my guy's Braylon Allen. And I've been talking a lot about Braylon Allen, leading into the season. I was expressing optimism about Braylon Allen, and through the first 3 weeks, he has justified that optimism. He looks very good. In fact, week one, he didn't really get much of a chance. He only got one carry, and it was in the last minute of the game. So the Jets didn't really give him much of an opportunity week one. Weeks 2, weeks 3, he's seen his share of the carries go up, and he's delivered. He's running. He's just a tough runner. He's a perfect complement to Breece Hall. I made this point on Friday, and I'll make it again. I feel like it's almost like Breece Hall is more effective when he's got Braylon Allen getting a lot of carries, because the two of them have such different running styles. Breece is more of the patient guy, wait for his hole to open, make the read, and then explode through it, whereas Allen is just more the guy who's a power back. And that's oversimplifying things. Breece is a tougher runner than people give him credit for, and Allen's got breakaway speed. Allen's not just a guy. Allen's not just a guy who runs people over. There's more subtlety to his game running the football. One of the things that impressed me at Wisconsin when I watched the footage of him was how he kind of set defenders up, where he kind of threw a cut on a defender and took the defender from a position where he was in position to make a sound tackle to a position where he had to make an arm tackle. And folks, you're not going to make an arm tackle on Braylon Allen. He's just too big, too powerful, and too fast. He'll explode through to the gap, and he'll be off to the races. This is a dynamic 1-2 punch at the running back position for the Jets. And I'm just happy the Jets have finally figured out that running back is a young man's position, and running back's a spot where you should try and draft people. I mean, look at the two backs the Jets have. One was Breece Hall, who was drafted in the second round, guy who's been a phenomenal running back since he set foot on the field, guy who probably would have been rookie of the year 2 years ago had he not gotten injured, and a guy who looks like a genuine star. He got him in the second round. The fourth round is where you got Allen. So running back's not a position where you need to exhaust big resources. Through the years, we've seen this so often where the Jets give these old running backs, these guys who are huge name running backs, they give them these fairly big contracts, and they try and just squeeze one more good year out of them. I mean, how many big name running backs have the Jets had in the last 15 years on this team? You could go back to LaDainian Tomlinson, who I always argue this was not as good as people remember. Everybody thinks of LaDainian Tomlinson as this great successful signing. He had a great first month. He had a nice run in the playoffs in 2010. The rest of his 2 years were pretty ordinary. You can talk Chris Johnson in 2014, talk Matt Forte in 2017, talk Frank Gore in 2020 when Adam Gase built his offense around a 37-year-old running back. Enough with the big names. That Dalvin Cook last year. Our latest, maybe Dalvin Cook was the guy who finally taught the Jets that running back is a position where you should draft people. It's easier to find a good running back in the fourth round than it is to find a guy at a lot of positions. Not that it's easy, but this shows you Jets have two good young running backs. Neither of them were drafted in the first round, and one of them was drafted on day 3, in the early stages of day 3, in Braylon Allen, who looks like a player. And another point I'm going to make is I think both of these running backs are going to be key to making the passing game work, because this is a kind of a quick strike offense. Look, Rodgers showed he can still throw the deep ball, but the first couple of games of the season, Rodgers liked to get the ball to the running backs. And I've said this frequently on the show that, if you're a running back and you catch the football, after you secure the catch, you kind of go back to being a running back. So how can you make the play with the ball in your hands? Now the blocking is a little different. Even on screens, they don't block it the same way as they do a handoff. But on some level, it's once the ball's in your hand, essentially, it's the same thing. And that's when you have two talented running backs, you take advantage of that. And the other thing is Rodgers is not going to. One thing we know about Rodgers is that he's not going to put the ball in danger if he doesn't like what's there. And this is one of the things that's sometimes great quarterbacking is about the mundane. With Rodgers, one of the things that makes him a great quarterback is, if he doesn't like what he sees, he's fine checking the ball down. He's not going to force it. So these running backs are both going to have a big opportunity to contribute in the passing game. Then on the defensive side of the ball, the guy who was really under the microscope was playing well was Will McDonald. Now, here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to throw a caveat out here. If you think that Will McDonald is playing at the level of the best pass rusher in the NFL because he has 5 sacks in the last 2 games, either you're just reading the box scores or you're just really trying to hype the Jets up. Will McDonald is not playing at a level where he should have 5 sacks in 2 games, because that's the level that's the level where you're the best pass rusher in the NFL. If you're watching these games, that 3 of these were kind of chance occurrences. There was the play where he was the spy and Will Levis took off, and McDonald did his job, but he didn't beat them. It wasn't like he beat an offensive lineman for a sack. There was the famous Levis rolled the ball to the Jets play where McDonald was in the area. I think may have contacted Levis. Didn't really do that well in that play. On Thursday night, one of his sacks came on a play where he was unblocked. So, these sacks are going to go down. But he still has 2 sacks where he beat offensive linemen the last 2 weeks. And you get a sack a week, you're playing well. So I'm not saying any of this to diminish what Will McDonald is doing. My point is that he's playing well. He's not quite playing at the level, that the stat line would suggest. He's not quite playing at the level the box score would suggest, but he is playing well right now. And that's a big deal because Mr. Reddick is out. It's a big deal because the Jets are thin at the defensive end spot right now with Jermaine Johnson's out for the season. So your top 2 defensive ends are now out. Reddick may come back at some point. In fact, I almost would expect Reddick to come back at some point because if he doesn't play at least 6 games, he doesn't become a free agent. So we go through this whole thing again next year. So I do expect Reddick to eventually come back. But again, I expected them to be here to begin with. I don't know how much Will McDonald can compensate for the loss of both those guys. I thought if the Jets lost Reddick, McDonald could do decent enough imitation, conceivably. I don't there's only so much one player can do when you've lost your top 2 guys at the position, but McDonald can be part of the solution. And I think the rest of the solution will be elsewhere. When you're talking about playing the run, Quincy Williams has stepped up in a big way. He's maintained his level of play from a year ago, and that's been important because the Jets defensive line hasn't always been playing that well against the run this year, but when they've had a defensive lineman pushed out of the way, Quincy Williams has flown into the gap to cover for that. When you talk about defending the pass, well, there's 2 ways you defend the pass. One of them is you rush the passer. McDonald can help bridge the gap there. The other is you lean more on your coverage guys. Maybe you blitz a little bit more to try and manufacture a pass rush. You depend on Sauce Gardner and company. You don't replace these guys. You don't always replace these key players you lose 1-to-1. Sometimes it's a collective. It's a collective type of thing where a bunch of guys pitch in, and that's kind of what the Jets need. But McDonald's clearly part of the solution. And heading into the season, if you asked me, I had a feeling Braylon Allen was going to be pretty good. I had some hopes Will McDonald would be pretty good. But through the first 3 weeks of the season, I think we now can say these guys both look like solid contributors to the Jets this year, and that's a very positive thing. Now, head on the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll talk about one last thing we've learned in the first 3 weeks, and that's an unfortunate thing. Jets have not been too lucky with injuries so far, but hopefully that'll improve, and we'll discuss that in more detail continuing here on this Monday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. The Jets are home favorites this coming weekend against the Denver Broncos. It's a game everybody's expecting to win. And don't even use the phrase trap game. Let's not talk about that. Instead, go to FanDuel again. A $5 bet gets you $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Just go to FanDuel.com. Again, it's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. This is the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Monday. It's a rare Monday where we don't have a game to talk about. The Jets played on Thursday Night Football. Usually on Mondays, we're either recapping the game that was or getting ready for Monday Night Football. This is a rare Monday where we are not doing either. It's a good chance to kind of reflect, though, because Jets had a sprint through the early part of the season. We knew it going in 3 games in 11 days to kick off the year. And, I hear it kind of makes me laugh because I hear Jets fans complain about it. Look, I get why you're complaining, but if you're one of those, were you also one of those people who were complaining the Jets are never in prime time? Because that's when you're a team that's very coveted for the primetime games, that's what it means. It means you get a bunch of short weeks. It means you get a bunch of inconvenient schedules. So I hope if you're complaining about this, you weren't complaining about the Jets never playing in prime time in the past. But the Jets, of course, navigated it well. They're 2-1 now. Rough week 1 game in San Francisco a couple weeks ago, but they bounced back as many of us thought they would. And the Jets are now in position to make some noise. Game against Denver this weekend, game 2 weeks from now in London against the Vikings. Very possible the Jets could be 4-1 in 2 weeks. Certainly hope so. And then sometimes you get the momentum rolling early in the season. It makes your year. And sometimes you have the reverse is true also. There are moments where you have bad breaks where you just fall behind. Put yourself behind the 8 ball early in the season and you never recover. So the Jets seem like they're in position to really get off to a big start, build some confidence, build some momentum as maybe one of the teams of 2024. Of course, one thing that got to change there is Jets need to get a little bit better injury luck. And this is tough because there's a lot we could talk about. We can say this guy needs to play better, or we can say this coach needs to change his scheme. Those are things that the Jets can control on some level. Injuries are kind of beyond your control. It's really about luck. And after a preseason where we talked extensively about how the Jets, made it through the preseason without suffering any key injuries, injury bugs bitten in a big way the first couple of weeks. And the worst one was Jermaine Johnson, who suffered the Achilles injury at a spot, again, where that's a tough spot it's tough to lose Jermaine Johnson when Reddick's out. If Reddick was here, you could see them weathering the storm a little bit better. And that's one of the, it just comes a point, no matter how deep you are in a position, at some point the injuries just pile up. Take Morgan Moses. Now, we got good news on Morgan Moses. Saturday, NFL Network reported that Morgan Moses will only miss 2 to 4 weeks. And while that's not a great outcome, while we obviously would like to see Morgan Moses in the lineup, I think when you saw him go down in the second half of Thursday night's game, you saw the pain he was in. That was a really scary thing for the Jets. And it's weird to say this because I don't want to lose Morgan Moses for 2 to 4 weeks. But Thursday night, when we saw that injury happen, we saw the pain he was in, we saw just like how his leg bent. If you had offered you'll miss Moses 2 to 4 weeks, but he'll be back after that, I think most of us would have signed up for that in a heartbeat. And this gives Olu Fashanu a shot to step into the lineup, the rookie out of Penn State, who was very highly decorated prospect. It's his chance to shine. And it's entirely possible. Look, it's entirely possible that Olu Fashanu goes out there and plays great. And if he does, I don't think he leaves the lineup. We've seen this, I've seen this before with the Jets, where the Jets, have a rookie who's maybe begins the year as a backup. As he performs, maybe there's an injury and he performs and he never goes out. I don't know why this is the example that comes to mind, but 20 years ago, Jonathan Vilma was like this. Jets drafted him. He was a linebacker out of Miami. He began the season as a backup. They had an injury at the linebacker spot. Vilma went in there. He never gave the job back. It didn't matter who got healthy. Vilma stayed in the lineup. And I think that could happen with Fashanu if he goes out there and plays well. But my expectations are more hold the fort. As I've said, I think it's a lot to ask a rookie, even when it's as polished as Fashanu, to go out there and play at a high level. I'm just hoping he holds the fort. And because of the way the Jets have aligned their tackle position, they could afford one injury. So they got their injury now in Moses. They can't afford a second injury because they don't really have anybody good behind, as the number 4 tackle. So again, injury luck. Hopefully Moses comes back and is healthy. The Jets have missed DJ Reed early this season. I think Brandon Echols did a good job in reserve for Reed. But you just hope that the Jets, it's nothing they can do, but it's just one of those things where, frequently, and we saw this, we had the ultimate example of a season being derailed by injury last year. But, one of the things that's difficult watching the NFL is that having a good season comes down to 2 elements. There are the things you control and the things you don't control. And one of the things you don't control is injuries. And that's tough because good injury luck can help make your season and bad injury luck can break it. Jets haven't broken yet, but you just hope you have better luck. And no more of these Jermaine Johnson season-ending injuries. You just hope that they're able to avoid those because that's a big loss. And again, a team like the Jets, there's enough talent there that they can sustain a little bit. They can take on a little bit of hit. You just don't want these things to pile up because at some point, the laws of gravity take over. Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you enjoy the show and are listening on the podcast source, please give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. It helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Enjoy your Monday, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow to talk more Jets.